Hey everyone, I'm working to hit 1,000 subscribers, and I need your help to get there. If you enjoy this content, please hit that subscribe button right now.
You want to talk about pain? You want to talk about a decision that's going to haunt John Schneider for the rest of his life? Let's talk about 7.8 feet. That's it. That's the difference between a World Series championship and the most devastating loss in Toronto Blue Jays history. 7.8 feet. The distance between where John Schneider positioned his infielders and where Miguel Rojas hit that crushing home run off Jeff Hoffman in Game 7. And I'm not exaggerating when I say this might be the most painful what-if moment in this franchise's entire existence. Let me set the scene because I think people have already started to forget the specifics, and we cannot let that happen. Game 7, World Series, Blue Jays versus Dodgers. Toronto had leads in this game. Multiple times they were in position to win it all. The offense showed up. The starting pitching gave them a chance. Everything was there. And then the seventh inning happens. Jeff Hoffman comes in to face Miguel Rojas with the game on the line. Schneider had positioned the infield in a specific way, a slight shift, trying to take away certain holes. And Rojas hits a ball that goes just over the infield, just out of reach, and it ends up being the home run that essentially decided the World Series. Now here's where it gets absolutely brutal. After the game, defensive metrics came out showing that if Schneider had positioned the infielders 7.8 feet differently, that ball gets caught 7.8 feet, not 7 yards, not 70 feet. 7.8 feet, that's 2.5 steps. That's the width of a small couch. That's nothing. And it cost Toronto a World Series championship. Do you understand how insane that is? Do you understand how that number is going to follow Schneider around forever? And before anyone comes at me saying hindsight is 20/20, that's not the point. The point is that in the biggest moment of his managerial career, John Schneider made a positioning decision that was off by less than 8 feet, and it cost his team everything. Now, could anyone have known in the moment? Of course not, but that's what makes it so devastating. And baseball is a game of inches, of tiny margins, and in Game 7 of the World Series, those margins mean everything. Let me tell you what Schneider is probably thinking right now, 6 weeks later. He's lying awake at night, replaying that moment over and over in his head. He's seeing Rojas at the plate. He's seeing where he positioned his defenders. He's watching that ball leave the bat and sail over the infield. And he's thinking about those 7.8 feet. He's thinking about how, if he had just moved someone slightly differently, if he had trusted his gut in a different way, if he had positioned based on different data, that ball gets caught and the Blue Jays are probably winning the World Series. That's the kind of thing that destroys a person mentally. And here's what makes it even worse. This wasn't some random regular season game in April. This wasn't even a division series game. This was Game 7 of the World Series, the ultimate stage, the biggest moment in baseball, and a decision that was off by 7.8 feet cost them everything. There's no bigger what if in sports. There's no more painful hypothetical. Because unlike a player striking out or making an error, this was a strategic decision by the manager that can be quantified exactly. We know precisely how close it was to working out differently. Now let's talk about what this means for Schneider going forward. How do you recover from that? How do you manage another playoff game without that moment haunting you? Every defensive positioning decision he makes from now on, people are going to second guess. Every time a ball drops in or goes over an infielder's head, someone's going to bring up Game 7. That 7.8 feet is going to follow him for his entire career, whether that's fair or not. And honestly, I don't know if it's possible to fully move past something like that. Here's the thing that really gets me. Schneider is a good manager. He got this team to the World Series. He managed the clubhouse well, made good decisions all year, and put Toronto in position to win it all. But none of that matters now. His legacy is going to be defined by 7.8 feet. It's going to be defined by the positioning decision that didn't work in the biggest moment. That's brutal. That's unfair in some ways. But it's also the reality of managing in professional sports. You're judged by your biggest failures, not your consistent successes. And let's be honest about something else. There were other decisions Schneider made in that game that people questioned when he pulled his starter, when he went to certain relievers. how he managed the bullpen throughout the game, but none of those are as specific and measurable as the 7.8 feet. We can debate whether going to Hoffman was right or wrong. We can argue about bullpen management philosophy, but we can't argue about defensive metrics. The data is clear, 7.8 feet different, and that ball probably gets caught. Now, some people will say it's ridiculous to blame Schneider for something that specific, that you can't expect a manager to get defensive positioning perfect to within 8 feet. And look, I understand that perspective. There's an element of chance in baseball. There's luck and variance and all that. But counterpoint, when you're managing Game 7 of the World Series, every decision matters. Every positioning choice matters. And the truly great managers, the ones who win multiple championships, they find ways to get those decisions right in the biggest moments. Schneider didn't, and it cost everything. Let me paint you a different picture. Imagine if Schneider had positioned the infielders those 7.8 feet differently. Rojas hits the exact same ball, but this time an infielder makes the catch. Inning over, Toronto holds on to win Game 7. They're World Series champions. Schneider is a hero. He's getting a contract extension. His defensive positioning decision is being praised as genius. Instead, he's the guy who was 7.8 feet away from getting it right, and that's going to define him forever. Here's another angle that makes this so painful. The Blue Jays organization spent millions of dollars on analytics, on defensive metrics, on positioning data. They have entire departments dedicated to figuring out exactly where defenders should stand based on tendencies and probabilities. And with all that data, with all those resources, they were still 7.8 feet off in the most important moment. What does that say about their systems? What does that say about how they use information? Because either their data was wrong or Schneider didn't follow it correctly, and either way, it failed spectacularly. And let's talk about the human element here. Jeff Hoffman is the one who gave up the home run. He's the one who has to live with that pitch for the rest of his life. But how much of it is on him and how much of it is on positioning? If the infield is positioned correctly and that ball gets caught, Hoffman doesn't give up a home run. His legacy is completely different. So in some ways, Schneider's 7.8-foot mistake didn't just cost the Blue Jays a championship, it potentially damaged Hoffman's career and mental state too. Those ripple effects are massive. Now, will John Schneider get fired over this? Probably not immediately. He still has support in the organization, and you don't fire a manager who got you to Game 7 of the World Series without at least giving him another chance, but I guarantee you his leash is shorter now. If the Blue Jays struggle next season, if they don't make the playoffs, or if they lose early, that Game 7 decision is going to be brought up constantly. The pressure on him is enormous now in a way it wasn't before. Here's what I think about when I consider this situation. There are players who made errors in big moments and went on to have great careers. Bill Buckner famously let a ground ball go through his legs in the World Series, and while that defined him to some extent, he still had a long, successful career before that moment. But managers don't get the same grace. When a manager makes a strategic decision that costs a championship, especially one that can be quantified as precisely as 7.8 feet, it's much harder to move past. The scrutiny is different. The blame is more direct. Let me give you one more painful hypothetical. What if 20 years from now, the Blue Jays still haven't won another World Series? What if this was their one real shot and it slipped away because of 7.8 feet? Then Schneider's decision doesn't just cost one championship, it potentially cost an entire generation of fans the chance to see their team win it all. That's the weight of managing in October. Your decisions don't just affect one game, they can affect decades of franchise history. Here's my final thought on this, and it's the most painful one. John Schneider is going to be asked about this for the rest of his life. Every interview, every time he's on a broadcast, every time he's at a baseball event, someone is going to bring up Game 7. Someone is going to ask him about the positioning. Someone is going to mention 7.8 feet. And he's going to have to relive the worst moment of his professional life over and over again. That's the curse of being so close. That's the burden of making a decision that was almost right but ultimately wrong when it mattered most. 7.8 feet. That's the distance between glory and heartbreak, and John Schneider is on the wrong side of it forever.